All right, let's rise for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Good morning, everyone. I will call the meeting to order. Are there any changes to the agenda?
Yes. Kay is out sick and has been since Friday,
Oh, dear.
so we're not going to do agenda item 1.
Okay.
But I do have an update relative to the bonding process
Yes.
and time period.
Yes.
We could start with that, and then I know that some people had some items they wanted to discuss, so I think this is going to be a pretty brief meeting. But I'm also able, I know there's a lot of stuff going on, so I'll answer the questions that I can about this item and others. So you have a memo from Bruce Kimmel in front of you. Prior to getting to the point where he's identifying a May 14th, that's today, but what we're waiting for before we get to the rest of the issuance of debt is the process with BKV and now ICS as the construction manager. ICS is going to take 2 or 3 weeks and work through the architectural documents to actually come up with a construction budget. And then we'll have that number moving forward, which we anticipate is going to be within a couple of percentage points of where we're at. And Bruce has explained all along that they've tried to estimate conservatively, which means that number should hold pretty, we're hoping it holds pretty true. There are 2 possibilities for the issuance of debt for this project. The large portion that's related to the jail could be issued as jail bonds. Jail bonds do not require a public hearing. They do not have a reverse referendum option. That portion for the government center, it requires a GO, a general obligation bond. And in my conversation with Bruce, I said, so to avoid issuing general obligation debt would mean that we'd pay cash for whatever we do at the courthouse, and we'd issue the debt over there is one option. And I said, I think the board wants to have a public hearing relative to the issuance of debt anyway, so I say bundle it as we were planning and issue the whole thing as general obligation debt. But of course, that's your decision, not my decision. It feels that you would want to have a public hearing relative to the issuance of the debt.
Are we at about 4 million for the courthouse?
No, where did I have that number?
That was gonna be my question.
I think it's like 2.
2 million? Okay, because the jail went up, so, yeah.
I think
Okay.
it's like 2 for the courthouse, so,
That'd be my question then, is do we have any fund balances to where we would have that option?
we very likely do.
What percentage would that put us back to?
But again, we don't have to make that determination today. Kay and I we need to do this investment and fund balance update and be able to make a recommendation for that. My preliminary recommendation is that coupon rates are still holding, so the cost to borrow money is less than the amount of interest we're making on our invested money. So Eller's and my recommendation would still be to bond for the whole thing, because taking money out of savings to pay that is going to cost us more money in the end. It's going to cost us more money right now. But it's still absolutely your option. But
And this is probably a question for Kay, do you remember what percentage we're at the fund balance? As far as, for reserve?
our policy is 50 to 75%,
Yep.
and we're above 50%.
Yeah, so we wouldn't have to lower that.
We wouldn't have too terribly much to work with,
Yeah.
but remember, we do have money set aside, and this project is construction in 24, 25, and 26, so we haven't seen the phasing of that. We don't know when the money is going out. So we wouldn't have to pay $2 million tomorrow because we didn't bond for it. We'd have to pay it in 25 and 26 as we do that. So we would have options to not even use fund balance, but to use current capital expenditures going forward. So I need Kay back here to look at the current fund balances and to look at the cycles. You know, this is a great time of the year because taxes are coming in this week. Everything looks good. And then we get to, July and August when we wear it down again. And so we can make a recommendation about that. But the other question is, I mean, if we can do this as jail bonds, then it's just administrative of the board, and there's not a public process for it. And that's,
It would be interesting to get public feedback as to if they would, how they feel about, instead of taking debt, paying, or if they would, I would just be curious.
And it's nice, like Jeff was saying, and that was gonna be one of my questions, is if we're gonna do a phased approach, what money do we need this year, what will we need next year? Thinking about just the government center, the jail, I think one way or the other, we'll have to bond for that, obviously. But if there is an option, but like if what Jeff is saying too, if we're making a higher percentage on what we already have in our investments versus what we're gonna have to borrow for,
by about 1.5%.
yeah.
So a question along that line would be, that may not be the case 2 years from now.
Yeah, that's
When
what I
we
was
do
thinking.
those GO bonds, they're gonna be 20-year probably, and when would they be callable?
I would have to get all of that information.
Oh, yeah.
Usually it's
5
usually
years.
5 or 6 years
Yeah.
before a
So we
GO is
couldn't just
callable.
take and pay it
Well,
off.
you still can, you can still pay the money into like an escrow account, and then it comes off the balance sheet, and it just keeps paying it.
Mm-hmm.
It's just cleaner if they're already callable, you can just be done with them.
Yeah, it would be unlikely that we, whatever we take out for 20 years, the most likely scenario is that we're gonna pay for it for 20 years, unless we have, and Bruce was asking me, about the possibility of doing an issuance for the GO now, or for the jail now, and the GO for, he said, do you have other projects you're gonna be bonding for? And right now, I'm not aware of anything in the next 5 years. I don't know that we have a major project over at Heritage. I don't know that we have anything, relative to the transfer station, but we're kind of holding out on that. That would be, again, that would not be a general obligation. If that would be we'd have to fund that through those fees. So I'm just not aware of anything else currently. The only other project on the horizon is if we ever determine that there's a need to do the court center in between law enforcement center and government center, and that's so far in the future that I don't even know how to estimate that number.
And Deep Lake Park isn't, that's not a big money thing in a sense.
So our intent to fund Deep Lake Park is to apply for grants and to match those grants as we get them. And we're showing 5 phases of somewhere from $1.5 to $2 million, and 20% of $2 million is $400,000. So I think we would pay that out of I think we would be better off bonding for the cost of this project and saving those money up for those $400,000, $500,000 bills that we are going to have
That's a good point.
over the next 5 or 6 years, and determine how to use those. And again, we had a conversation about putting the background work together for the financial management plan, and Bruce's proposal is that he would review that when he's here on June 18th as well. So we were gonna do it on June 11th because that's a work session, and it's the work session as we're kicking off budgeting. But we can't take action on the debt during a work session, so we moved it to the 18th, and I said, we can do the work session item on that day too, so they don't have to make 2 trips back-to-back weeks. We have a lot of legwork to do in the next 5 weeks to get to June 18th, but we should be wrapping both of those financial management plans and setting this bond thing in motion at that point in time. So what I'm just asking today is, my preliminary recommendation would be to go with GO bonds for the whole project. We'd issue that this year. We'd invest what we're not spending in '24 for 6 or 8 month periods of time, so that we can buy down the cost of the project a little bit. If we're showing a 12.5 project cost, and we're showing a $12 million issuance in total of 12.6, like is what's showing in there, that we would use some of the interest over the first 12 months to pay. We will have some capital costs unless we change the issuance amount. And I'm not recommending we change the issuance amount from what Bruce is modeling, because I kind of like the debt number going from 820 to 1,015,000 seems like something we can work with within our given parameters. So that would be my recommendation, but this is the description of the process to get to that point.
I just have a question when you were talking about, putting money and taking it off the balance sheet, but if we can't call it for 5 years, let's say hypothetically, things reverse with interest, the interest rates, we couldn't just take and pay down a lump sum at that point.
No, but you can take,
You
if
could,
you owe 5 million in bonds, you could put 5 million in a specific account that's completely dedicated to paying off the bonds.
so are you
It gets it off the balance sheet then.
Yes, I understand that part, but
So it's basically.
are you thinking rates are going to go down at some point?
I'm just hypothetically saying, just for discussion, right? Or, yeah,
Yep.
It's hard to refinance until they're callable, is it
Yeah.
not?
yeah, and that was my point,
Yeah.
yeah. I'm not saying we should do anything, it's strictly discussion.
Yep, no, and that's exactly the point of this conversation, is just to ask and answer some, or mostly ask those questions, and I'll try to feed them into Bruce so that when he comes here, we know what we're doing. But by the time he gets here, so we should have another conversation about this, by the time he gets here in June, we'll have this ready to go for action. 29th, we would be publishing the intent to issue GO bonds of approximately this amount, right? So before the end of the month, we kind of need to know today, are we intending to issue GO bonds? Because if we're just going to do jail bonds, then we don't need to go through this notification process.
It might become irrelevant to, at least in 5 or 6 years, to even want to pay them off, even if rates drop to some degree. Well, it could be. But if you're currently making more money on what you're saving than what you're spending on the bonds, it's probably all wash out anyhow.
Well, in the first few years, it has a positive impact on what we need to ask for levy. So the net of it is, if borrowing the $12 million is more cost effective than paying some down, because then we're generating less interest income on an annual basis, then the cost of that debt is higher, and we would need to go to levy for that. So the financial management plan will in fact model levy needs based on all of the current operating parameters of staff and services and the cost of doing business, and estimates of cost of living or CPI increases. And it'll take that out 10 years, but again, like every other plan, it's going to be more accurate 3 to 5 years out, and then it'll be adjusted every year. So I believe at this point, bonding for the whole amount is going to cost less on the levy the first 3 years than using fund balance, because then we won't have that money to pay that portion of that debt service.
And the problem is, once you use fund balance for covering your debt, I mean, you pretty much have to do that every year, or you're gonna take a big chunk,
Or you're gonna end up having to come back with
Raise
a
the
bigger
levy.
levy increase
to
in
build
the
up the
subsequent
fund
year.
quite a bit more to cover later
Yeah.
on.
And if we leave ourselves short, then that limits on other things like Deep Lake Park or anything else that we may.
The flexibility for
Yeah.
economic development or park, or
Or unfunded mandates.
unfunded, the cost of doing business. We get hit with
You don't wanna use it for that.
boilers for
No, I know,
$200,000. It's nice to be able to
There's
just
an
buy
emergency
them.
for a
It's
year.
operating, yeah.
Yep.
But I'm inclined to fall in with Jeff. It's like, build up the capital reserve account and invest it. I'd rather have that build up for a while until, maybe someday we'll get to a point where it's clear as daylight that, we can spend some of that down. But until you get there, I wouldn't do it too early, because there's no rational reason for doing it now when we're making more on investments.
the levy 5, 10 years ago was about 92 or 93% of the compensation budget for the county. And now it's down to like 82 or 83%. And we really don't want it to get lower than that. So our compensation budget is the thing that drives the levy. If it goes lower than that, we end up taking funds that are intended to provide direct services to use them to pay staff. So if we've got 21 million approximately in wages this year budgeted, and we have a 3% cost of living increase next year per the contract, and we've got approximately $3 million in benefits this year, and we don't know what that number is going to be. We've got a meeting in July where we're going to have some inkling based on our usage, an idea of what that looks like. But if that goes up conservatively 5%, that's 150,000, and 3% on 21 million is $630,000. No. 780. Oh, I got too many zeros. It's about a 4.5% increase just to cover the cost and compensation. So the normal number to carry our normal cost is 4% plus or minus. To manage that levy to be as stable as possible, and hopefully to be covered by a good portion of new tax capacity growth within the county, then that's to maintain a stable amount of debt, to maintain healthy fund balances that are generating income to offset some of those additional expenses, is the long-term way to make that levy increase as stable as possible. And it's 4 plus or minus 2. And hopefully we continue to see 2% net tax capacity increase, which means that the net increase is 2 plus or minus 2. That's what the financial management plan is going to give us for a model, is to be able to tell you what we're going to need for levy relative to. And they asked the question yesterday, said, what do we plan for staff increases? And I said, nothing. They said, that's not realistic. And I said, I know it's not realistic. So I said, we have to think about 250 employees, 10% is 25, 5% is 12. So I told them to put 2.5% in a year just to show it, because we have to show it. And then there are certain years where we're gonna, like this year, I'm gonna try really super hard to not have any. And at the same point in time, if the results from the Economic Development Committee say that we need one, then I'm gonna be the first one to put my hand up and say we need an EDA director. So that's one of the things I told them to cook into the formula, is make a conservative estimate relative to staff growth.
I can't imagine we see too many levies in any government entity down around 2% anymore. And everybody's got inflationary pressures. Oh, yeah. Pretty rare anyhow.
4 to 6 usually covers it. 4 can usually get it done if you have healthy fund balances and you can roll things from one year to the next. And with our operating capital and economic development operating piece, we have a little more flexibility than most counties our size, which means we can operate closer to 4 for a period of time. But those are good questions, because that got me into the conversation about thinking about what this year is going to look like, and then June 18th we'll have a lot more actual data to look at. Kay will be here next week with hopefully with the investment report, and and then also with the dates for the budget calendar for the year, which we just reviewed the other day.
Tom or Steve, do you have any comments?
Just thinking in my head, I agree that the bonding is the way to go. How we split it up, you know, whether we want to do jail bonds. I've had a lot of sandpaper rubbed on me about the project, so it's been abraded quite a few times. So part of me wants to say, let's just leave that stand alone. But I also think the other end of it, that if we combine the two, that does allow us the stability in expenses, you know, 20 years out. And there's something to be said for that, is that consistency, that allows you to plan and make changes on other ends of things, that is, just simplifies it. So I'm okay either way. I guess that's where I'm standing on it right now.
To have a callable bond right from the beginning, you have to pay a higher rate.
The more flexibility you build into it, the more terms and conditions, yes, the lower people's bid are gonna be on that.
Okay.
So yes, it will have an impact. The more we can take Eller's recommendations, which will be relative to how things are selling and what they're selling for and what people are interested in buying, the higher the price they'll pay for it, is what they'll ask for, yeah. I can get some I can ask the question about callable and future opportunities and get that to you in a memo long before we have to make a determination, but.
So Ellers will be coming with, before us with more information, or?
No, they will be here when it's time to issue the debt, but I will be speaking with them and answering some of those questions and forwarding that to you as information updates about the process as we go through.
Okay. So then is there benefits to having two different bonds? Jail bonds and for the jail and government obligation bonds for the?
No, the only benefit would be to not have a public process to issue the debt. And I don't see that there's gonna be an issue with that, and I believe you guys would wanna hold a public hearing to hear comments about it. At which case, the easiest thing, if we were gonna need 17, 18, $20 million, we may issue a chunk now and a chunk later, you know, in a year or 2 years down the road, instead of issuing the whole project. But in this $10 to $15 million, Eller's recommendation is to just issue it in one bond. So we talked through the process of, does it make sense to issue some now? And that's why he was asking me the question about what do you need 1 year, 2 year, 3 years down the line? And I said, I don't see it. And then he said, well, we're back to a single issue, makes the most amount of sense. And the only issue is if you wanted to go jail so that you didn't have to go through the public process. And I said, no, I believe the board wants to have a public process. I think we want to put this in the paper and have a public hearing and go through all of that. And then he said, well, then the easiest thing to do is just do the full thing as GO and do it as one issue.
Especially if we can invest what we're not using.
Yep. See, you're gonna have issuance fees for every bond. And if we did one for $10 million and one for $2 million, it would cost us more than doing one for $12 million. Some of it is fixed cost for going through the process, and some of it is cost relative to the size of the issuance. But it would be like, it's a bad example, but it's the only one I can come up with. If you're gonna bounce a check, bounce one big one instead of two little ones, right? So that you only pay one administrative fee on it.
The pain is less.
This is the exact opposite of that, but there are fees associated with it. And that's why he's saying for 12 or 10 to $15 million with our bond rating and all of those other items, one issuance makes the most sense of that.
So what happens if we bond for, let's say, $13 million, and everything comes in well under budget at 10 or 11? What about that excess bond monies?
I can literally ask that question. I haven't thought of that. If we know our number is 12.5, do we bond for 12.5 plus fees, or do we bond for 12 million plus fees? And I'll ask for the recommendation on that.
And can we forego that extra debt and just simply, reduce that dollar amount? Or could we use those funds for something else that is needed?
Yeah, one of the process when you do a GO is that we have a capital plan, right? So that's good. We've got that 5-year plan. We'll work together to update that. And I have to incorporate the capital plan for solid waste and for highway that are not in the, the general fund, so that they can use it in the modeling, and B, the GO requires, having a current capital improvement plan to do that. So we're not gonna have to pay them for that because we've already done that. But I do have to update that for them by the end of the week. And the point of that is that the issuance has to relate to projects on that list.
Okay.
So you can't intentionally bond for an extra $500,000 without identifying what it's gonna be for.
Okay.
Was part of your, excuse me, Tom, but was part of your question then, if we came in that far under budget, would we then just put the money and get it off the balance sheet?
Yeah,
Is that what?
yeah, basically, yeah.
If our full faith estimate is 12.5 and we bond for 12.5 plus fees and we come in at 12.2, we have no problem.
Yep.
If we believe our project cost is 12.5 and we bond for 13 and we come in under, then there may be some fees related to pay relative to that overage.
Okay, all right.
Back to using the term arbitrage, I think, that if we bond for money and in, just for the purpose of being able to invest that then there can be fees on that.
On the other side of with the investment, some of those CDs that Eller's purchases, are some of those callable? Because if interest rates suddenly start dropping down, as fast as what they went back up, they can start calling back these things and saying, you're gonna get a lower interest rate.
So the strategy, and Ken, I've been involved in some of the phone calls with Eller's Investment and Kay over the last 6 months, and the strategy has been to buy longer-term investments and ladder those so that we can guarantee that interest earnings over a longer period of time, because we're anticipating that it's not going to stay where it is for rate of return. And yeah, there will be some point in time when the rates go down below what we're currently earning, and the next one we renew will be at a different rate. But that hasn't happened yet. So,
Well, even when you buy a CD, I bought some that are, it has the word callable on them. So if interest rates suddenly drop, you had a 5-year at 4.5%.
yes,
Some the bank can say, well, we're down to 3.5% now. We're going to take this thing back.
some are and some aren't. And that's why I want to give the full investment and fund balance update, because the investment will identify the mechanisms that we're invested into, and it'll provide that detail for you. Yes, some are callable to get the best rate. Now, if we do a 36-month at this rate, it's callable after 12 months, meaning we might not get that, but not all of them are that way, and not all of our money is in CDs. A lot of it's in money market, which obviously fluctuates a little more. You get your increases in earnings immediately, and then you also suffer when rates go down quicker. So all of these pieces work together. By the time we get to June 18th, we're gonna have a really good idea of what we have to work with, and we'll also be able to make a strong recommendation based on this conversation on which way to go with the bond issuance, which will actually happen. Will you make the determination? You make the determination on 18th. No, the 18th is a public hearing, and then on the 5th, you'll actually sell the bonds of August.
So what I'm hearing, it's board consensus that we would do general obligation for the full amount?
As the primary model.
Okay, to give Jeff direction.
An update relative to the EDA process, I should see a draft of the report for that group today or tomorrow. we're hoping to schedule a meeting for next Wednesday afternoon, a Zoom meeting to get that group back together. I'm supposed to see the report and then make any comments that I have, and then we'll push the report out to the committee, so, I don't have a specific time, Wednesday afternoon. Is there a better time, or is there a time that doesn't work for the two on the committee?
I got, next Wednesday is wide open.
I was thinking afternoon.
I can make it work, but it's actually a bad day for me. I'm supposed to be in Thief River Falls. But if it needs to be, afternoon,
3 o'clock, 3:30 could be made to
yeah,
work?
that's fine.
Okay. And it's gonna be Zoom. And our hope again is to get, that's what we said at the meeting, was to have this meeting before Memorial Day, and to make sure that everybody had the draft report a week ahead of time in their hands, so, I think that's the timeline we're still on. And I think those are the, updates that I had about finance, budget, investment, and just that whole package of things.
I have a couple things. Does anybody have anything? I just have a couple of informational things. Okay, first of all, I just forwarded, an email to Jeff asking him to forward it to you from a commissioner from Warroad, and it's about the pigs in Kitson County. So take a watch. It's pretty interesting. Secondly, someone I know has started working for Knut Nelson. She's a very seasoned nurse, and she is really impressed with their organization and their management. It just confirms to what Dave and I see in our heritage meetings about how they run things. And third, I'm just passing this on for information because this was an experience I had last Wednesday. I have a friend who has a felon, and she has applied prior to being a jail dispatcher. And she can't work at the jail as long as she has a felon on her record, and so Corey and I have been talking about what to do, because you can get felons forgiven or removed from your record. So Corey told us what to do. And so, the felon happened in Becker County, and the cost was gonna be $250. Well, she contacted me last week, and White Earth was holding a clinic put on by the Attorney General's office, where you could come and have your felon removed for free. And so I drove her up there. It was a really interesting day. I talked to the people from the Attorney General's office, and they started doing this last November. They had it done, and they did it in Moorhead. They had 400 people show up. They did it last Wednesday at White Earth, and on Thursday they were going to Bemidji, and then they're gonna, later this year, gonna be in Rochester and Duluth. And as we sat and waited, so we got there, and she got a number, and then we sat and waited for her turn to come up. There were 6 stations. And I heard people behind me talking about how hopeful they were that they could apply for a better job once they got their record cleaned up. And people were just excited. So the atmosphere it was a wonderful atmosphere to be in. There was one table, well, 2 things. One, there was League of Women Voters were there signing people up to vote. And second, there was a table when we came in, and weren't sure which table to go to. So we went to this table first, and the woman I was with asked if that's where she needed to register, and he said no, but if you can't get your felon taken care of here, then you come and see me. And so I jokingly said to her, we don't wanna go to this table. It ended up, her felon could not be expunged last Wednesday.
Wow.
And so she actually has to go before the pardon board down in the cities. And so that will include the governor and members of the Supreme Court. In the state of Minnesota, they hold it 4 times a year. and I volunteered to be a witness for her because she has wonderfully changed her life around for many, many years. And so I was really encouraged that the Attorney General's office is taking this on. This is the first time this last year that they've done this like this. And the whole day was really positive. And I just thought that's one good thing that they're doing to help people move forward in their life. While we waited, her and I walked some of the grounds, and a man came up and started talking to us. And then we started talking about farming, and anyway, he introduced himself, and he was the chair of White Earth, Michael Fairbanks. So he asked who I was, and I told him I was a county commissioner for Hubbard County. So that started a really interesting conversation about the White Earth land. And so basically, I just really encouraged him to come to the table and be willing to talk about, because there's lots of conversation needed. And he did agree that there are parts that they have no solution for at this time, so. Anyway, it was just a really interesting day. I was glad to be a part of it.
Yeah, I always believe in second chances, so it's, I was glad to hear that.
She would be an awesome jail dispatcher, because she could give the women hope. Plus, she's walked through, it's a hard life to get on and rebuild, and she's walked through that very successfully.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Anybody have anything else?
The only thing, I was just curious what everybody thought about the lodging tax, open forum.
Well, that was interesting. What
A lot
happened
of
when you
different
went at night?
perspectives, a lot of different perspectives.
What did you, for the
There
verbal?
were several people that owned short-term rentals that had a negative view of it, as just being another fee that's going to drive their costs up, so it would in turn drive the renters' costs up, and that would take away from the opportunities to have more renters, because of all of the increased money that has to be taken. So, and then there were other people that there were very positive about it, saw the benefits to the additional advertisement to generate interest in the area. So, I really didn't hear a whole lot of negatives on our end of it. Do you recall anything besides the?
There was one gentleman there that had short-term rentals,
Yep.
but when we implemented what the county has implemented, he got out of it because of it. Then there was one lady there on the phone that, like you were saying, she's already losing customers because of rising costs, and she just feels that this is maybe make her close her short-term rental type of thing.
So I know someone that has a short-term rental, has been renting for several years here, and she didn't feel it was so much the rising costs, as she said there's so many of them now, that there's so many more to choose from. I don't know the reason, but I thought that was an interesting perspective.
And then there was, I asked the question if anybody was from northern Hubbard County,
Oh.
and nobody was. So it was kind of disappointing, but there was also conversation about if we did something like this again, that it should be a Zoom meeting, because a lot of these short-term rental owners maybe don't live in Hubbard County.
Yeah.
And so it might be, and it might be a bad time of day or whatever type of a thing, but, yeah, I remember Bonnie's first name, but I don't remember her last name. She looked familiar. She said she was at the morning session, but she had come before the planning commission years ago for her resort and talked about the meters that we had her put on and this and that kind of stuff,
Oh, for septic? then?
and water usage and stuff like that. She's now at a point where her 26 unit resort's down to 10 because of costs. So,
Well, Derek raised that in the morning. I don't know if he talked about it at night, but wasn't it in 1985, there was 107 resorts in,
2000, like early 2000s, we're at 104 resorts, and
Okay.
we're now down to 44 as of 2019 numbers, so.
yeah.
And
And
he-
along with that,
he
yeah,
tied that into, if we lose the resorts, what economically that will do here. And then it'll just be a trickle effect.
he also showed the growth in lodging revenue at that same time period. And Hubbard County was only growing at 2 to 2.5%, and everybody else was growing at 5 to 8%. And
or
you could
more.
see a distinctive bump when some of them instituted the lodging tax in their marketing plans.
Yeah,
So, you know, those two pieces of data, I look like, if we keep doing what we've always done, we're not gonna grow much more than 2.5%. And everybody else is outpacing us. And number two, we're gonna keep losing resorts. You know, so I don't know how you address that. I mean, this is one option to try and, you know, everybody else seemed to be, when they looked at those same numbers and those same trends, they were pretty much maintaining or slightly growing their amount of lodging.
And the resorts are gonna, some of them are gonna go away anyway, because in the recent Zillow listings, I've seen one resort sold and another one listed, and they're being listed as family compounds.
yes,
Not
because
resorts.
they talked about that, because the dollar difference is so much greater by selling it that way than as a resort. So for every $25 spent in marketing, let's see, return is $25 spending for marketing.
For every dollar.
Yeah, for every dollar spent, and then Derek had, for Hubbard County, it would be $4.5 million. But I don't remember, yeah, but I don't remember the course, was that per year?
Yes.
Okay. And Tom, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, Derek presented some good information for the resort owners there to come to a decision on whether they're for or against this, but there's a lot of discussion, and it went over, and they never really got to a tally of what the consensus of the group was, whether or not they wanted it or did. Some did, some didn't.
I thought the consensus was they wanted another meeting in the fall.
Yeah, so, yeah, I'm in favor of it, but at the same time, if there's not a consensus in favor, you know, then, well, if that's what you want, that's what you get.
One thing that was brought up too, that I thought a little bit about too, you know, where they talked about staggering it, you know. And,
Yeah, 1, 2, and 3.
and the more I thought about that, I don't think that would be a good idea, because number one, even if you implement it, whenever you do, it takes a year before you get the revenue necessary to even start. So if you stagger it, you're gonna push that out 2 or 3 years. I don't know that that would be a good idea. So the idea about, you know, starting at 1%, then 2%, 3%, I just think you would be harming yourself, because you would be delaying the benefit for quite a while.
Yeah, it's gonna take up to 5 years before you can even get
Yeah.
data to justify if it's working or not.
Yeah, or if you start right away with it, you know, at least at the end of the first year, you can start marketing the next season.
They made a good point, where, you know, you know, even if you're not looking at filling your shoulder seasons, and if, you know, like we were full from mid-June to mid-August, but, I probably wasn't charging anywhere near what I could be charging. Where if you were marketing this more, you can get those rates up more.
Yes.
And, you know, that was one of the things that, there's a number of factors that went into why I broke the place up, but one of them is that, our rates really weren't what they really should be. A new owner, in order to pay what I would have wanted for the whole property all at once, would have had to bring those rates way up, and he would have been way higher than everybody else. But if you had this marketing program, everybody would have been up there.
It's kind of like I go to the common, you know, a rising tide lifts all ships. You know, you may have some that say, well, I don't have any more capacity, and then, that's true if you plan on staying, all things being equal. But if you can raise rates because the demand becomes higher, then all ships are rising.
And also, some properties may have land to add more units, but they're not adding them because, the rate, you know, the rates aren't up there.
Plus, you know, okay, yeah, everybody's 100% full in July, today. But all of a sudden, if you have $4.5 million of revenue coming in, and your shoulder season started to get better, that means there's more people coming to the area. That means there's opportunities for more resorters or more people or current resorters to expand the amount of units they have to grow even further, even in July.
So, I'm not sure if this came up with Verb, but it did with the resort owners, that a lot of those, they have the same people coming back year after year, and so this is family to them. And so, they didn't want to lose that group of people by raising their rates. So that was just a comment, and the second comment was a resorter said, we have regulations coming to us from the state of Minnesota. So I have to make my bathroom bigger, I have to make my bedroom bigger. However, the ordinances in Hubbard County don't allow me to make my cabin bigger. So if I'm gonna make my bathroom and my bedroom bigger, I end up with a living room and a kitchen this big. So he said, for us, we need to look at the ordinances, because they're not keeping up with the state of Minnesota.
And I tried to mention to him, you know, because there was a list of stuff like that.
Yep.
And, you know, the county resort association should put together a list of concerns they have that, in our ordinance, that make life difficult, and we can explore that and look and see if there's something that can be done locally. But as far as all the state regulations and stuff, there's no appetite to change any of those. So,
He wasn't asking us to
Yeah.
change those, he was just saying, if the state's
Makes
telling
it
me
fun.
I have to do this, then the county has to be able to allow me then to expand my cabin.
but I don't want them focusing on things they can't change. You know, so don't say no to one idea that maybe can make a change that benefits you because you're focusing on the things you can't change. You'll get nowhere if you do that.
One thing I was kind of surprised at, they talked about only being, what was it, like 74 short-term rentals?
Yeah, I think that number's
Registered,
quite,
Yeah,
quite low.
but-
Well, because they're only focusing on shoreland, you know.
Yeah,
so-
but I remember the number was over 100 when we first started doing the ordinance. So it's like, okay, was it, you know, for some reason in my mind, it was 140 something. If that was true, if I'm remembering correctly, and now it's down to 74, well, have we already driven some out? And then like Steve was saying, and we only require a license on Lake Shore, and that's because we were the neighbor complaints and worried about quality of the lake, you know, septics, and that's why we've got that in the ordinance. So then I think speaking with short-term rental owners that I know, that aren't on shoreline, then they're kinda like, so you want me to add 3% tax just to get more money? Cause we're not doing it to protect the lake, or that we don't have neighbor complaints like you did, you know, with the ordinance. So now, and then,
The lodging tax is not for environmental enforcement, it is for tourism.
that's what
Yeah.
I'm saying though, that's what these people are telling me, is I'm not on a lake, so now all of a sudden I have to go to the county, get a license, pay the hundreds of dollars, I have to raise my rates.
How many short-term rentals are not within the shoreline district?
Well, there's a lot, I'm sure.
And we really don't know because it's not reported.
Well, but
So,
that was the planning commission and this board's
Yes.
direction, was to put the short-term rental enforcement within the shoreland ordinance, right? So we didn't do a countywide short-term rental ordinance intentionally, we wrapped it into the shoreland ordinance, so that's where our authority is, but I would be, they're checking, go on the VRBO and the Airbnb and look and see how many sites are available in Hubbard County and see which ones of those are on our list and which ones aren't on our list. If people are publicly advertising, and I guarantee they're paying more in their fees through VRBO and
Yes, I would
Airbnb
agree with
than they
that.
would be paying in lodging tax.
yes.
So the costs of those services are significantly more than they would be paying in the lodging tax. That's where we come up with that number. The other number, I think, was an estimate.
But your answer to that 3%,
Yeah.
they would probably have more people inquiring. Because of advertising, more people possibly would wanna come here.
and one of the comments was made that I don't need advertising because Airbnb and VRBO is my advertising. Somebody wants to research an area, I can go there and they're basically advertising my
And I
location.
would-
Yeah, but you're looking at,
It's a different,
it's a different
aspect
kind of
to it. Yep.
advertising than what
It
the
is.
lodging
Definitely.
tax would be,
Yeah.
more broadly about the whole county.
Yeah.
But people think about Hubbard County because of the general advertising. And I would suggest that there might be a reason not to weight VRBO short-term rental owners as highly as resort
Yeah.
owners.
I would agree with that.
Because the tax capacity for the short-term rental, yes, it's a thing, that's what it is, but if somebody rents it out or doesn't rent it out, the tax capacity and the taxes paid to the county is the same. Whereas if we continue to lose resorts, right? They provide a general benefit, and provide more impact. I can't measure that, but I think that there's an argument to say that taking a hand count of yays versus nays and having a Zoom meeting of all the people who have ever used a short-term rental in Hubbard County would be stacking the deck in a bad way. As opposed to, I think it's very good to try to reach a consensus relative to the resort owners in the community and make sure that the business community and the resort community and the hotel community are all on board with this. And I think that's the process Derek is leading those groups through. And I asked him to provide me a summary if he had one, and I haven't gotten a response yet, but.
So it was, I didn't write this down, but Beltrami is doing much better. They have a lodging tax, and they're doing much better as far as the number of resorts they still have. I just wrote down the top 4 besides Hubbard County. Becker County from 1985 to 2019 went from 61 to 23. Cook County went from 42 to 37. Derek talked about how Cook County and Lake of the Woods have really advertised. They've increased their marketing. Lake of the Woods went from 21 to 29.
One thing I never thought about until that night, and maybe David knows because you've been a resident forever, has there ever been a big resort in Hubbard County, one that has a convention center, like the ones around Brainerd and stuff?
No.
So like a Wanawak, except a resort.
Yeah, and then that's what I thought is with the 3M property, it's like, well, if somebody was thinking on that line where it's not only a resort, but it's a convention center, that would
Nothing
help,
That size,
that would help
yeah.
the area.
But that, and that, like Derek said, he said, maybe some of our larger resorts end up going more corporate, like Brainerd. He says, if it's a difference between losing the resorts or going corporate, he says, I'll take the corporate route. And I guess I would have to agree with him, because, we do need something like that.
Yeah, that's my thought, because if you have, like you say, one with the convention center, well, now you're bringing people to the area that might not come to the area. And all of a sudden, it's like, oh, this is, Hubbard County's nice. I wonder if there's other opportunities for me to rent or buy a vacation home or retire here, or any number of things, that.
I would say the only problem with that is I don't think we're mature enough to be attractive enough for something like that. There's not enough goods and services here that people look for when they come for a convention.
Well, if you thought we were ready for it, obviously the corporation that is looking to do that doesn't feel we're ready. If
That's right.
they would be investing the money.
Yeah.
I'll just give you an anecdotal example. When in youth hockey, we always tried to have youth hockey tournaments up here and put heads in beds, and get these teams to come up here. We always really struggled to get 8 teams to show up here. In my experience when I was in Walker for 4 years, they had no problem at all having youth tournaments and filling them with Twin Cities youth programs. I'll give you one reason why. You probably can guess the reason why. They all decided they wanted, it's called a casino. So they would all come and want to locate up here because A, the casino, or B, Chase on the Lake.
Sure.
So they have no problem filling theirs. Every free weekend they had an opening in their schedule for
And it's-
multiple days, they could fill them.
And it's that close, but people see a straight line up 371, and they see a curvy line to get over here. Yeah, but the casino, their hotel rates are usually discounted because they supplement that with other rates. There's all kinds of reasons that happens.
And that's the theme I heard from most of the parents, because each team might have 1 game, maybe 2 games a day. There's a lot of downtime. What are you gonna do? You need something to do. Well, most of them said they were gonna go to the casino.
Well, you can buy Wanawak, Ted, and start this whole idea. I think that's your
Oh, okay.
calling.
Yeah.
Well, the day was a wonderful first start.
Oh, yes,
Of course.
definitely.
Yeah.
I don't have a position on it one way or the
Yep.
other. I want that group to bring something forward. I look at us as more of the implementers of the plan. So I really don't have, I used to own a short-term rental. I thought it was great, it was fantastic, but it got to be way too busy for me. amongst other things, my health problems came into play and everything like that, so we decided to sell it. But it was a great adventure. It was profitable, both during the rental season and also when we sold the property as well. So I just don't like the capital gains tax that has to be applied to it, but yeah.
I was blown away by the amount of resorts that have closed or sold off. And if we look at the next 10 years, if the trend keeps going, how that will affect Hubbard County, that was really sobering to me.
And I'm guessing that we're actually doing better than other areas of the state relative to maintaining resorts. Becker County doesn't,
No,
just about
yeah,
decimated.
yeah.
And it is interesting, Hubbard County's got so many really wonderful things. And I can tell you without a doubt, because I do it all the time, snowmobiling up here is better than anywhere else in the state. A long shot. Most people don't know it. A lot of people don't know it. And those that do come here and snowmobile for a weekend, they keep coming back. But a lot of them think, Brainerd's better, or, Alexandria's better, or even the North Shore is better. Well, the North Shore doesn't have the amount of trails we have you can go 4 different directions here without hardly seeing the same trail much more than 10% of the same time, you might duplicate 10% of the trails is all.
And then the issue of, people that are, we implement a lodging tax, but that doesn't cover the people in Becker County, Beltrami County, that, are they gonna be willing to donate that money? That's,
So
Well,
the
they can
change,
voluntarily do
yeah,
that.
you
Yeah,
can,
they
yeah,
can.
If they
Yep.
choose to,
Yep.
if they can see
the
like
benefit.
some of those Osage
Yep.
resorts and stuff like that,
Yeah.
they might see a rational benefit for partaking in it.
Derek said there was 18 members of the chamber that were in Becker County.
So they could get the benefit without implementing the
Yeah.
tax as well. There's the other
Right,
side of
but,
it, so.
but the people that were there that lived in Becker County, suggested that they would voluntarily support.
I know that a couple of people commented how they thought things would improve when Deep Lake Park gets done.
Yes, that was another aspect that was brought
Yeah.
up.
And I could see it's another attraction.
Yep.
And the other thing is, I think campgrounds are exempt. They can voluntarily be part of it if they want.
Yeah.
Well, anything else, or otherwise I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Just
Oh,
the other,
go
I just
ahead.
wanted to, upcoming meetings, is anybody going to the Hubbard County Township Association next Monday?
Yeah.
Okay.
I was
I've got a conflict. I've got the planning commission plus HRA that same evening,
Yeah.
so I can't make it to all 3. There's no way.
And I was thinking about going to Hubbard County Township Association. That's in White Oak.
It's in White Oak, correct?
I've been there before.
Okay.
Used to have property there.
And I did do a webinar for demystifying continuous
you do that?
improvement.
Okay,
A lot of what they talked about, it seemed like I didn't have enough background to understand some of the concepts and some of the things they brought forward. So I'm gonna go back, and I'm probably gonna watch it again on my own time, just whenever I have a chance. So, it was interesting, but I was also quite busy at the time, so I didn't get the opportunity to really focus on it the way I should have.
Motion to adjourn?
yep. Second?
Second.
Tom seconds, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Thank you.